Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to a new composting class. This is Composting 101. It's introductory. It's how to start composting. So it doesn't matter if you start just right now, you don't have any idea about composting. So we are going to be talking about that. Um, my name is Christian Acosta, agricultural educator from Cornell Cooperative Extension, Allegheny County. And it's a pleasure for me to be in these online classes and be talking about some gardening topics now that the weather is better and now we can start going and working in our gardens. So first, before starting talking, I want to make sure that you can hear me. Can you confirm if you can hear me well, if the video and everything is good?
Everything looks good here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So let's start. So let's start with the basic question. What is composting? So we have heard this term, this word everywhere, but sometimes we don't know like exactly what is composting. So it's just the process about transforming organic matter materials into a rich substance that is like a new soil that is called humus. So this humus is like a natural fertilizer, is like creating soil that we can incorporate to the soil, and plants they start getting the nutrients from this process. So sorry. So from this process. So why to be composting? So okay, we can hear about composting, but why to do that? So composting is just a way to reuse organic materials from your home. For example, when we are cooking and we have the plantain peels, the banana peels, and all those parts that we are not eating from the salad, from some leftovers from this process of the cooking. Also, to keep biodegradable waste out of the landfills, because this is a material that we can be using and we can go and put back in the nature. So it's not necessary to just throw everything in the same can and then all that, because of the plastic and all that, is just being there decomposing and not being used, when we can be using that in our garden. And also it's a way to save money, because if we are doing our own humus, our own fertilizers, so we are saving money, right? We don't need to go and buy chemical uh, fertilizers. And also it's a way to reduce your carbon footprint. So if you're in feeling that eco-friendly, that responsibility, that vibe about helping our environment, so that's also a way that you can be contributing for this, reducing the carbon footprint. And it's an alternative to be burning. For example, sometimes you can see that someone can be burning these materials, and well, this is, well, part of this, when you're burning, part of this goes back to the earth again, but it's more what you are contaminating than what you are actually giving back to the soil. And also, it's like I mentioned, it's an alternative. It enriches the soil without using the chemical fertilizers. So because chemical fertilizers, it means something that is produced in a company, in a factory, and they work and they are not highly contaminating, like pesticides, for example, herbicides, pesticides, but still it is chemical, and some of these may affect the soil and the microorganisms and everything that is living in the soil. And also it's expensive. Those ones are really expensive, especially if you have big crops and you need to apply a lot of them. So doing this composting, it's a way to get all that organic matter of natural organic fertilizer, and the plants easily can absorb that. So what is happening while you are composting? So it's just this is a cycle. So as we can see here, so first we have our vegetables. It can be fruits, it can be the leftovers from the kitchen, like I was mentioning, something that sometimes is not uh, edible, so we can probably it has some fungus, or it's just too like out of the time that you don't want to eat that. The bananas, for example, when they turn just black, but they are still good. They are not decomposing or full of fungus or something like that. They are just black, but sometimes that is not that nice. Like visually, it's not that nice to eat. So instead of just throwing it in the garbage, you can put in the compost pile and start composting. So as we can see here we have the scraps from the kitchen, and we put in our compost pile, and we can have here in this compost pile is where all the magic start happening. So we can have in this compost pile thousands or millions of microorganisms that we cannot see. Probably we can see the big ones, that is the worms, for example, when we are using worms to do the compost. And this is something that also we start now learning, knowing that there are different types of composting. So it's not always with the worms. So that is something that I hear, like, oh no, I don't. One day I was talking to someone and she was telling me like, oh no, I don't do any composting because I don't have money to invest in the worms, and I don't know how to keep them alive and all this. And I was like, no, you can do composting without the worms if you want. So this is just one type of composting. You can start even a small one or big composting. And about my personal experience when I was in the university and just starting learning about this. I grew up in a city. So when I was learning about composting, I said like, nah, that's not for me. I need a big space. I don't have a farm. I was living in an apartment, so I cannot be composting. But when I was studying over the time, I learned that you can be composting even in a small apartment. And we are going to see the different alternative, different methods that you can be using for be composting if you have just a small space, if you're in the city, if you are in a country area. So there are different options. So yeah, we can start composting. It doesn't matter if you're a gardener or you're actually studying agricultural science or something like that. No, you can learn. It doesn't matter the space. Doesn't matter if you're just someone starting to do this. And it's easier than you thought. And well, so in this box where all the magic happens, we can find millions of microorganisms between bacteria, fungus, the big ones, the big organisms like the worms, and a lot of microorganisms, and they are just working so hard there to transform these scraps, these food leftovers into the humus, into that fine material that it's amazing to know, to see this process. And this is something that is not only for your plants, you enjoy seeing all this process in front of you. And after this process, we start taking these results, this produce, and now we have this natural fertilizer, and you can go and apply directly in the garden. So in here you can grow your vegetables again, your fruits, your vegetables, your flowers, etc., and all start over again, because it's not only about the scraps from the kitchen. You can use any organic material from your garden. For example, when you finish your at the end of the season, for in October, for example, you can just pick everything, all that material from the tomatoes, the beets, and all the plants that they are just there. So after harvesting, you can collect all that and start your composting. So it's a natural cycle. So of course, we cannot compost everything. So especially if we are going to use this compost, this humus, to plant something and then eat those plants or those vegetables. So what can we compost and what we can not compost. So first, the things that we can definitely put in the compost pile or in the composter is vegetables. As we can see here, the house plants, when the house plants, they start just dying, something happened, you probably overwatered them and they just didn't make well. They didn't make it. So you can start composting those house plants. All the yard trimmings when you're mowing the grass and all this material perfectly that can go in the compost pile. Coffee, the tea, when you just make your coffee and you have that, the leftover from the coffee machine, go to the compost pile. The fruits, so you finish your apple, your pear, peaches, the banana peels, the plantain, also when you're cooking plantains, all that, welcome to the pile. All that is welcome to the piles, and like nutshells, the egg shells, it's something good. It's a source of calcium. The napkins, and something to learn about this one, especially napkins or paper towels, for example. If you have been using this for, I don't know, to clean some surface, you're cooking and cleaning a little bit. But if you are using napkins, and they are full of oil, for example, if you're cleaning the pan and it's full of oil, butter, if it's something that it has been already cooked and you use that paper towel to clean that or to put some leftover in that paper towel, that is not nice. That is not good to put in the pile. So paper and napkins when it's just clean, when it doesn't have especially oil. And paper scraps, cardboard. So all these can go directly into the pipe. Something to have in consideration here is that, for example, paper and newspapers and cardboard. Well, newspapers, we don't have much that problem now. It was way before, years ago. But about the cardboard, especially this cardboard from the breakfast products or any product that you can see that is full color. It's color everywhere. So sometimes you just need to check about sometimes they tell you if it's recyclable or compostable or not, because the cardboard is fine, it's okay, but the ink, so all that ink that is there that they are printing, sometimes some of those chemicals in the ink that is not good for the pile and for the microorganisms that they are working there in the compost pile. So pay attention to that, and it's better just, if you're not sure, no, don't put that in the compost pile or in the composter. And things that what not to compost, that something that you cannot or you shouldn't be putting in your compost pile, is dairy products, the food, for example, after being cooked. So the fish, the leftovers from the meat, the chicken, the eggs, rotten eggs, or things like that. So no, everything that is fat, like with butter, oil, no, nothing oily, and especially also like pet waste or even human waste, because there are people that also they want to compost these. And I'm gonna mention why not, because you can do it, but it's not a good recommendation. So also the diseased plants. So here one recommendation: if you have your plants, for example your tomatoes, and all of them they died because of gray mold or some disease or some bacteria that it just killed all your plants. So in that case, no, don't put any of that in a compost pile, because those microorganisms can survive, and then you're going to put that again in the garden, so you're spraying more those diseases, that disease, those microorganisms that they are not good for your plants. When I was talking in the previous here, like houseplants, yard trimmings, is just when they die by natural process, or when you just harvest and you don't need any more that plant, but the plant is okay, is good, okay, you can compost that, but not when they are full of diseases. And in that case, just take those ones and burn them, or just in the garbage and far from your garden, far from your your soil. Also, you can see the fruits or vegetables, sometimes they have some stickers, so they remove that, and then you can put that in the compost pile. So those stickers, they are not compostable. Medicines, so sometimes it's like, oh, I can put that medicine, probably it nothing to see, nothing happens with that. So no, because we don't know those chemicals, multiple chemicals in those medicines, like well, for everything. So they are chemical, they are still chemical, and they can have some reactions with the microorganisms, with everything. So it's better not to be composting medication or cigarettes, especially if you're going to plant potatoes, eggplants, potatoes, eggplants, tomatoes, peppers, all kind of peppers, because they are the same family. And the cigarettes, they are made with tobacco, so they are the same family of plants. And especially in the cigarettes, they can have some virus that they cannot affect you if you like to smoke. It's not affecting you. It's just a virus that can affect the plants, especially the same family of plants. So no cigarettes, even when they are some brands of cigarettes now, they are using, like, putting seeds in the filter, so they are like compostable and all that. But it's just avoid that. Don't do it. Avoid that thing, because some virus can survive in the cigarettes even after all that process that they make. And especially with tomatoes, potatoes, they are highly sensitive to this virus. And of course, broken glass, that can take, because glass can take, I don't know, if even hundreds of years to be transformed into another materials, and also is really dangerous for yourself or for whomever is working with the compost. So how to start composting, and that is the question today. This is a beginner class, right? So how to start composting. We have multiple options. Here I'm showing you different options that you have. So it doesn't matter, like I was mentioning before, if you live in the city, or if you are you have your backyard, or if you have your farm and you have plenty space to be composting, you have multiple options, and this is so great. So let's check some of these options, and so you can be learning about these ones, and okay, which one can be the right one for you. So something that probably all of us we know is the typical pile of composting. It's a pile on the ground, nothing fancy, is the cheapest, and it's so easy to start because you start just throwing and putting things in a pile, and that is not science, or not a lot of knowledge to do this, right? It's just a simple pile, but to make it work, it needs to be big enough. So if you have just some leftovers from the kitchen, some grass that you were mowing, and some material like that, and you have just in the garden a small pile, probably that is not gonna work. So we need the recommendation here is a pile that is at least 5 feet wide and 3 feet tall, the height 3 feet, and then we can start composting. So if you don't have, it's a lot. So if you just think about that, it's a lot of material, especially if you are just in a small apartment or just a small backyard that you have. So in that case, okay, this is not for you. But if you have a lot, like you have your farm and you have a lot of product that you don't know what to do with all that, so we can start composting. And this one is a little bit challenging, so it's still, even if you are a beginner, you can start working with this one, but it can be a little challenging sometimes. because we need to keep the temperature inside, but not too high, not too low. We need to make sure that it always is moist, is wet, because we can create something that some gardeners call the volcano mulch. And uh, it sounds like that's like a joke, but actually it's real. Some of these compost piles, they can reach high temperatures and start creating fire, combusting there. So that's why it's important to keep it moist, keep it wet, but not like soaking. So it's something that is with experience, trying and failing, and then trying again until you, by observation, you can start checking and realizing, okay, in this side of in this part of my farm or my backyard, the compost pile behaves in this way, or if I move it in this shady area, or if I put a clear a plastic cover, or if I put a black plastic cover, so it can reach higher temperatures or lower, and how it's behaving. So it's just an experiment, and you can be just playing with that. And it's composting is something that we don't need to be rushing and be like, oh my God, I need to do this like right now. It's something that you can take your time and patience. And if you're doing just for a business, to start a business about composting, of course you can start just working more often and having compost, working in different methods to have the compost faster. But if that's not your case, and you can wait a couple months, so you can just start just trying one way, the other way, because also that we have here in Allegheny County is microclimates. So this is why I cannot just show you one way to start a compost pile in this way, because it depends also the temperature, the weather, the humidity, and everything. So if you have a different microclimate, the compost pile can be working way different than your neighbor that is just probably 5 minutes from you. So if that's the case, just start even your journal. That's a recommendation. If you start your garden, your composting, your take note and keep your journal about what is the behavior, what are you observing, and you are becoming in this scientist for your own garden. So this compost pile, it takes sometimes, it depends how big you start this compost pile. It can take from 6 months to 1 year, or sometimes less than that if the temperature is higher, and it's cheap. So you don't need to be investing a lot of money in this. Is for free. You can start this, and it's easy to move if you need to move from one area to the other area. Recommendations with this one, don't put it close to your house, because if you start composting and it is very, very close to your house, and these reach high temperatures, you can start creating a fire. So that is dangerous if you start just piling, for example, close to the wall outside in your house. So I have seen this. So it's like, no, no, don't do that. So you don't need like the huge backyard or garden to be composting. Just make sure that it's not touching your house, because the temperatures can be dangerous and create fires. Now we have composting bins, and these ones, they can be just natural, I mean handmade, homemade ones, and you can start this with a bucket. You don't need like these fancy ones that you can see here. But if you want to buy one of these ones, there are different prices. So these are so nice because they have actually three sections. So the first section that you can see here is where you put the grass and all the materials in there. In the middle is the composting process. So is that material that is being composted. In between each one, so here, these lines that you can see here and here, there is like some strainers. So it's so nice to see this process because you can see how everything is just like in the different phases. So here in the middle is everything being composted, and here at the bottom, so we have the actual result and the product of this composting, that is the humus, and you just open some of these ones. You can open this little door and start taking your compost to sell or to apply for your garden. So these ones are really nice. They don't use a lot of space. Also, they keep animals out. For example, with the compost pile, we can have some animals just trying to dig and try to eat some of those vegetable leftovers or fruit leftovers. So these ones keep animals out of there. But something that I forgot to mention in the previous one, when you have the compost pile, and just to avoid this problem with the animals, put all the fruit and vegetables and all that can be eaten by some animal, put it in the middle. So in that way, the smell and everything is something that they cannot perceive that. And of course, because it's hotter in the middle, so animals, they are not started, they don't go directly into the pile. So with these ones, they are nice and they can last for a long time. But the thing is that they can be pricey. They can be expensive. You can find small ones, or if you have the time and you want to just start working and crafting something like that, you can start by yourself and put in like getting 3 buckets and some net that you can use like this strainer in the middle, like here, and create your own composting bin, just homemade. So it's time, and that can be cheaper, way cheaper, but it's just time consuming. At the end, that's it, because you don't need to be like an architect or something like that. These are so simple. And if you have a small space, this is perfect because, as you can see, it's just vertical, so you don't need a huge pile. Another one that you need bigger space, and if you have this one, especially if you have your own farm or just a big space that you can start, something like this is a homemade composter. And as you can see here in this image here, so we have the 3 sections. So this one is not vertical like the previous ones, like this one. This one is horizontal. So you can have, in this case, right to left. In the first part that is covered here, so you have all the materials, the grass, the leftovers, all the big things going in there. When it when the composting process starts, so then you can start moving to the medium place, and here is still in process of being composting, so it's not ready yet when it's in the middle. And then moving to the final stage, so the material is fine, is nice, is soft, and you can see it doesn't look anymore like grass or like vegetables. It looks like humus, like soil, like new soil. So this one, as I was mentioning here, one to fill, one that is in process, one that is ready to use, is a cheap. Here is just about time, because this is time consuming. If you want to build one of these ones, all you need is the wood, nails, it can be plastic, or especially is better metallic, netting that you can use as the strainer, as you can see here, to be moving from one place to the next. And that's it. So it's not that expensive if you just go and get the materials and start doing it by yourself. So it's cheaper than the previous ones, and it works in the same way, but it's bigger. So that's the thing. Have that in mind, that is bigger. And of course, because it's open, totally open, so the smells and everything, that's something to have in mind if you want to start these ones. And another one is the tumblers. This is the fanciest one for me because they are perfect for any place. You can have these ones in in small apartments, for example. They don't take much space. They can be perfectly, sorry about that. They can be perfectly sealed, and the smells anything goes out of there. It keeps animals out of the composting, same like the bins, the composting bins. And you can be moving it, so it's everything is just so easy. It's ready for you to use. You can just be turning and moving these ones. And this one that you can see here, this example, is still big enough. You can have it in the backyard or indoors, but it's going to take some space. But in the same way, there are some tumblers that they are small ones, just to put in the on the counter in the kitchen. And same, they keep the smells and everything inside. You don't have problems about that, about mosquitoes or flies or something just around there, because it's just completely sealed. And every time that you're cooking, you just put that in that composter, that tumbler, and it's nice. So they are just amazing. How we, if you have the budget to be buying something like this, you can start composting without all the smells and without building your own composting, homemade compost um, tumbler or bin. So these ones, of course, because of that material and that technology, they are expensive. They have small, because they are smaller than a big pile. So of course, the capacity is limited, and the weight sometimes can make it depends how much you put in there. It can make a little bit challenging to be moving, rotating the compost, but it's amazing, like I was mentioning, especially if you have small space. And you can get these ones online. So because of this is an educational class, I cannot recommend be recommending um, some website or some specific brands. So you can just Google it, or online, even in the hardware stores, local stores. Sometimes they bring some of these ones, sometimes they don't because of the price. Sometimes a tumbler can be perfectly $300, $400. Some of them can be less than that. So it depends, of course, the material, the brand, and all this. But this is an option, and I wanted to mention if you can start doing that. So before I start, like how to start composting, is there any question here that you have about the different options that you have for the composting? Any questions so far?
Not yet. Thank you.
All good here.
Okay. Okay, we 11:33, so we have about 30 minutes, and while time flies. So now you have the options. This is the important step number one, that is, okay, where I'm going to start composting. Once you decide, okay, I'm going for the pile or the composting bin, or I'm building my own one, or just buying one online. Now you can start actually composting. So start collecting everything from your garden, the trimmings, the plants, and everything that I was mentioning in the beginning, all the things that we can compost. So you can start collecting these in a bag or in a box, or just any place where you want to start collecting these. Even if you can go out and start picking some material, so it's okay, so like the leaves that they are falling from the trees, you can start collecting that. And of course, if they don't have fungus or some bacteria, or they have some diseases. So bigger things like the wood chips and things that they are bigger, you can start composting these ones, and it is highly recommended that you can get these ones, because sometimes we can have in mind that, oh no, it's only leaves or it's only small things, like little things that we can be composting. No, if there are bigger pieces of wood, of leaves, some branches or something like that, is actually better, because that can create like some pockets or some space where the air can be in there. So and that provides the oxygen that the bacteria and all these microorganisms they need to be alive and to be composting. They are the ones that working so hard there to transform all these materials for us to use. So the water also is fundamental in this process because all these microorganisms, they need water. Of course, they need to survive. They need the water and also to keep the temperature controlled, especially with the pile. We are not, remember that we are not creating a volcano pile, volcano mulch, a volcano composting pile. So always keep it moist. You can put some water in it, but not like soaking wet, just a little bit. Just keep it moist. That's the key. And especially if you have the composting pile or the compost in days like these days that it's really hot and no rain at all. So take care about this step. And be patient, because here patience is one of the keys, because it can take about 6 months. It can take 6 to 1 year, and 6 months to 1 year, or a little bit more, because it depends about the material that you're putting in there. It depends about the temperature. So the higher the temperature, the wetter is better. It's going to be faster. But for example, here in New York State, so sometimes it's really cold, or we can have long periods of time that it's cold. So of course, all these microorganisms, they are not going to be working at the same pace. And so right now, that's why we are talking about composting right now, because we can start our composting pile right now. That is getting warmer. It's going to be these microorganisms, they can be working faster, and but it doesn't mean that you only need to be composting in the summer or in the spring, summer, fall. No, you can start doing it any time of the year. Of course, winter, they are just going to be very slow, working very slow, these microorganisms. So be patient, be patient. So we can have two ways to make the compost, and this is the passive or active. So passive is just when we just put the materials in there and we forget about our compost for a couple of days, and you just make sure that is moist and that is not like creating a volcano in there. And we check our compost, but it's not too often, so we have just to wait a couple months. We are not just there on top of the compost bin or the compost place. Or the active one, that you are producing this because you need something faster and you need to sell, or it's just you're starting your business about composting. So of course, in that case, you start working more often. You start, if it's a compost pile, you start turning the compost and be working more in this compost pile. And of course, always in passive or active, you always need to make sure that the compost pile is moist. So in this case, 40 to 60% of the weight in water, and this can take a couple of weeks. So of course, it depends the ingredients and the weather. Remember that the hotter, the warmer, the better. It's going to be way faster. So we start piling everything or putting everything in the composting pile, and then just waiting. And then how to know when the pile is done? So that is one of the important questions here, because sometimes we can see that, oh, something is happening, and yeah, I can see some material that is similar to here, to this picture. Oh, now my compost pile is done. Now I have my compost, my humus. So if we apply this material, this compost, and it's not done yet, it's this unfinished compost or this unfinished humus that may harm the plants, because there is still a lot of combustion and biochemical reactions in the microorganisms, and it's a lot of chemical procedures, right? A lot of chemical interactions in that moment. So if we take, that is the middle, is like the step number 2 in these compost piles. So if we take that unfinished composting, of course we can burn our plants. So it's the same like when you take a lot of fertilizer and you apply close to the plant and it's just a lot. Of course, that poor plant is going to suffer. It's going, probably you can burn your plant. So you can use the unfinished mulch, unfinished compost as a mulch. So, okay, that is going to be okay, far from the plant. But if not, so just wait a little bit more, and you know that your composting is going to be ready when the pile is not too hot. So it's about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. We are talking about Fahrenheit. So the temperature is between 10 degrees. The difference is about 10 degrees, more or less, but about 10 degrees from the air. So if you check the thermometer or just the weather, and it's, for example, outside can be for 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you take the temperature in your compost pile or your composter, and is 70, 78 or a little less than that. So okay, that's a good indicator that your your compost is ready. You have your humus ready. Also because you can see that from a lot of material, organic matter, organic material that you put in there. Now it's about less than half that, probably 1/3 of what you put initially in there. So all that material now is a little bit, and the color especially is dark. It's more like soil. If you just go and take soil from the garden and you compare with your humus, so it's kind of not the same, but it's just the texture, the color is similar one to each other. So you can, okay, it's dark, and the smell is earthy. It's like the garden. You can compare with your garden soil, and is that smell earthy? It's not like alcohol, because when this in this process you can feel the smell like some sweet alcohol, like is fermenting something, like vinegary. So that's not ready, that's still in process. But the smell, when the smell just reduces a lot, is more like earthy. So yeah, the compost is ready. That humus is ready to be used right now. This is another method that you can be using. It is the trench composting, and it's just taking one area from your garden or your backyard. It doesn't need to be so big. Like this right now, that is from the University of Illinois extension. That looks huge, but it's not that big. It's just a small one. And it's just 3 steps. So actually it's a raised bed that you can do. And the example here, for example, in this, the year 1, you can have in the first, you divide that square in 3 sections. The first one, the first step, so you can be planting, for example, here in the first one, you can put all your plants in there, some vegetables, some whatever you want to start growing in there, vegetables, flowers, etc. And in the middle, you start the composting pile. And then here, you don't use that one. So the third one is just like a walk-in space. Next year, now you start moving your compost, start moving to the next one. And now in the beginning, in the place where the composting was last year, this place. So now you can start planting things in there because it's rich. That area is going to be rich, it's going to have all that humus and all those nutrients. So of course the plants are going to be growing. They are going to be happy in this place, growing a lot and using all those nutrients. And for the year number 3, so you move now the compost area, the compost place to the left, to the first place. And in this way, year by year, you're moving your compost area. And in the same way, you're rotating crops because you're not planting in exactly the same space. So you're moving you're rotating, plant rotation, crop rotation, and also the composting rotation. So two benefits from the same area, the same process. So this cycle, it's is one idea. And how deep you can start doing this? Just 1 foot deep, because remember that especially if we are going to be planting vegetables, they don't develop like a deep root system. So this is easy to be using, and you have multiple benefits from this one. Okay, so this is one idea. Now, what I was talking in the beginning about the worms, like, oh no, I don't have the money to be buying all these ones and using that. No, that is just one way to be composting, and is using worms. So the term for this is the vermicompost, um, and is using the worms. So of course, usually is Californian worms, and these ones, of course, is going to be way faster because they are bigger. It's bigger organisms in there working and doing all this process. You can have this worm humus, and they are the ones working for you, just transforming all these materials into the final product, the final humus. So this one is exactly the same, like starting the compost pile, like I was mentioning. And of course, this ones is better if you have just a bed to do that, not in a vertical way, just horizontal way. And setting up is easy. So right now we are not talking exactly how to start like the composting with the worms, because there is some science behind this one about the quantity of the worms, the temperature, how to start, the humidity, and yeah, all the everything. I just have like all the same time in my mind right now, thinking about the temperature, the humidity, and all the conditions that these organisms they need to survive, because sometimes we can lose money if we buy a lot of worms, and then because it's too cold, especially when it's too cold, or the compost pile is too wet and also too dry, so they die, and then you lose that money. And they are not very cheap, especially, well, it depends, the place where you're living right now, they can be also expensive if you need to bring some of these worms from another area. So you can start reading about this. Take in mind this term, vermicompost, and in this way you can start reading about this. And if you would like to know more about this and learn more about just only about this composting method, you can reach out anytime, and we can also develop classes. It will be even nicer in person to be teaching and learning about this method. And so you can just take a screenshot about this one right now if you want. This is just it's a lot of information to put together in less than 1 hour. So this is like the summary of the summary of the summary about how to be harvesting the worm compost. So this one is faster. It's not waiting 6 years or 1 year or more than 1 year. Like if you just do it without the worms, just waiting for the bacteria and the fungus and the fungi and all that to be working in there. This is way faster. Is 3 to 5 months, and you start producing your own compost. In simple words, you have your compost bed with the worms, and when you want to collect your humus, so of course the challenge here is to collect the humus without the worms. So in that case, you cover like half of the bed. You cover that one, you stop feeding the compost pile for 2 to 3 weeks, and then you cover that one and make sure that you're not putting also any water, so it's getting dry. And you put food, like the leftovers after the 2 or 3 weeks that they don't have any food. You put again the food. It means all the it can be sometimes just the newspapers, material like from the kitchen, vegetables, fruits in one side. So one side is getting dry, no food in there, and the other side is where all these nutrients are coming. So they are going and moving toward that direction because they need that food, right? And so after a couple days or even 1 week, they have migrated to one side of the compost bed, and then you can start collecting that humus. And that's just basically what is the harvesting process for this one. That's how the farmers or the composters, they are doing this. And when you buy the humus, that the worm humus, you're getting just the humus, even if it's liquid or the soil, without any worm in there. This is one of the examples how you can start. So even if you have some limited budget, you can start doing this in something like this. You can go to any store. I'm not mentioning brands, but any of these big stores, and sometimes they have sales for these containers, and this can be perfectly $10, less than $10 sometimes. And in these ones, you just open some holes because of course they need to breathe. And here you can put so you can see the air holes on the cover, also in the container, the bedding that can be the paper, cardboard, or newspapers, wet, that they are in there, and some organic material, some soil. And here you can put also your worms. And when I was mentioning is for how to be composted and harvesting from this. So you cover half of this with a plastic or with something, and then just putting all the material, the organic material, the food for them, in one side of the composter. So they are going to be moving from one side to the other side, and then you can harvest what is in that place. So now the decision, sorry, now the decision is yours. So which one can you use in your case? So, okay, now you have some ideas how to start your compost pile, and that if the budget is not a problem for you, you can start going and buying these ones. You can go and be shopping online or in some hardware store, checking some different options and the prices, and buying something nice. It means all of them, they are nice, but I mean something that is nice for you, for your space that you like. You can pick the color. Even now there are composters that even they have the lid that automatically open and all that. So of course there are composters for all for everyone, for every budget. So if it's a small space, now I can start probably just in a bucket. If you want just to start trying, if that works for you, in a bucket, or just building your own composter with 3 buckets and you do it vertical. And if it's you make this decision if it's if it's indoors, if it's outdoors, and how much you're going to be composting if you don't have enough material to be composting very often. So, okay, why to be spending more money with worms and with all this if you don't have a lot of products to be composting. And the time, so you want to be composting for a short period of time, or time is not a problem for you and you can just wait months, and that's not a problem. Where to get these composters, if online, if it's in person. How much time you have to be just checking the composting, putting some water and checking that everything is going well in there. And especially what we can see here, what is my ew factor. Like if you feel like easily like ew, gross about touching something, or the smell sometimes, or like picky, very picky about this. So probably even if it's the fanciest composter, still that is not going to be something for you because it's inevitable. So it's a lot of products, procedures in there. So of course, when we are working with microorganisms or the big organisms, so this is gonna create some texture, some smell sometimes, but it's not too terrible and it's not going to harm or contaminate your space, or that if you breathe a little bit of this, you're going to be poisoned or something like that. No, it's not dangerous for yourself. It's not dangerous for the environment. It's not. But if you're picky about that, so I think this is the class to decide, yeah, I can start composting or maybe not. Just going then and buying the humus on the or the final product from someone else. Something that if you're buying humus, when I mentioned before that you're saving money in this process is because the humus, the product from this is expensive. If you compare humus versus potting mix or any other soil, garden soil, or any topsoil, humus is expensive because of course now you can learn the time that it takes, all the waiting, all these, that taking care about putting the right material in there, composting something nice and organic. Some of them, they are 100% organic. It means that even the leftovers and everything that is put in there in the beginning is an organic fruit, for example. And then, so 100% of the product is organic. And so if now you can decide if this is something that you were interested in, really interested in start composting, and you want to commit to that, or if that was just an idea, or probably you're still deciding about this. So you can start something small and see if that works, and you can make your decision about this one. But I'm sure that once you start doing this, you fall in love about this process because it's so exciting. So like it's like magic because we cannot see the microorganisms working in there. Yeah, so it's like magic seeing how these products, these just leftovers, that like this garbage that we think that is garbage from the kitchen, all this organic material now is something that, like a new soil, new humus that we can be using in our garden. And your plants and your garden is going to be so happy and so grateful with you when you apply this product. So if you have some concerns, like I don't have room, you can use, like I mentioned before, the commercial bins. There are small ones, even tiny ones, tiny boxes that technology is amazing nowadays, how you can do something like this in a small scale. And if it takes too long, so you keep the proper conditions. Even some of these fancy ones they have temperature, you can regulate the temperature, so it can be faster. Of course, they are more expensive, so you can be playing up with the time. And if it's the temperature too low or too high, so you can also always put some water in there if it's too high, and if it's too low, you can cover with plastic. And and also there are community composting groups. So if you want to join, there is also a program of volunteers that is the composting group. I am forgetting this right moment exactly the technical title for this one, the Master Composter. And it's a course that you can be learning about this week by week, and then you get your certificate, and now you become in a volunteer, like the Master Gardeners volunteers. So you can be volunteering in this way and create composting piles and something bigger with more people around. So that's another way to be composting, and all of you benefit from the same composting pile, and all of you can be working. And also that works to create relationships with people that they have the same interest, the same passion for this. So And like I mentioned before, that if you're concerned about attracting animals, you can just put everything in the middle, the leftovers from the fruits or vegetables, put in the middle. And it's 12 o'clock right now, but still, if you have some questions, this is the moment you can unmute your microphone and make your questions right now if you want. Or if there is no questions about this right now, you can always reach out. So feel free to any questions. It doesn't matter, because sometimes we don't ask thinking that, oh, it's just I feel dumb, or I feel like this, or no. Sometimes any question is valid. Not sometimes, always. The questions are valid, because that's how we learn. It's just asking. And sometimes the questions that we think that is just too obvious, they are not, and can be fundamental, and it's like crucial and fundamental, because we can be doing some little step and ruining our process, or ruining something from our garden, not only about composting our garden, or how to control this pest, this disease. So for anything about gardening or horticultural areas, horticultural topics, pest diseases management, wildlife management, or something happened in your garden and you don't know how to control this, so anytime you can reach out. Okay.
Christian, thank you. This is very helpful, and you did answer several of my questions and more, so thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad that this helped you. Sometimes it's challenging for me. This online class is always challenging about putting a lot of information just in less than 1 hour, or just exactly 1 hour. But that's the idea, to be answering some questions like I was mentioning. It doesn't matter how obvious or easy can be the answer. You can reach out at any time, because this is why we are here offering these programs. And something nice about this technology is that we can do it for free, and we can do it remotely. So any question, this is my contact, or you can just type in your Google or any browser the Cornell Cooperative Extension Allegheny County, or the county where you're located right now, and we are always happy to help. For also something that you would like to know about this, or any other question, if you want to become a master gardener volunteer, also you can reach out at any time. So thank you for being here. Thank you. And I will see you in one of the next events that we have. Every month we have events about gardening, horticulture. And so I will see you soon. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy this warm weather.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.
Have a good day.